I don't think we can be surprised anymore that they try to talk out of both sides of their mouth, that they try to have it both ways. And yet, given the stakes on this one, it is nonetheless stunning.
It is stunning, but it's very consistent. It's exceedingly consistent. I mean, this is a party whose most of its elected officials, including the President of the United States, stood with President Putin against Zelensky. They changed the party platform to take support away from Ukraine 5 years ago. The president tried to, extract political information from the president of Ukraine in exchange for help. I mean, we're at a moment. I mean, it's really best. I think we'd be really clear. Most of the Republican Party, including the former president, has stood with Vladimir Putin and his autocracy. That is clear. That is clear. And any Republican who doesn't state that clearly, like Liz Cheney does, who doesn't state that clearly, supports what Putin is doing in this moment. You can't be more clear than that. You can't try to erase history. And it's not ancient history. It's not even old history. It's recent history. And so in my view, the Republican Party has to excise Donald Trump and all the others if they want to have any moral high ground at all in the midst of this global conflict that pits autocracy versus democracy.
Right, Jennifer, the question, of course, then becomes how many elected members they still have in their party if they do that type of excising. You put it really eloquently in the Washington Post, Jennifer. In the midst of an assault on democracy and the concept of a rules-based international order, a major political party has thoroughly debased itself and boosted the enemy of both to reaffirm objective reality and identify the threats to democracy. The public has a right to know. Are Republicans on Team America or Team Trump Putin? Jennifer, what does it look like to hold Republicans here accountable?
Well, I can only think of two Republicans that are on Team America, and that's Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney. The rest are caught in this really mess of their own making, which is, on one hand, they're scrambling to get on the side of Ukraine because all decent, free-loving people in the entire world are on the side of Ukraine and have condemned Putin. On the other hand, they stood by and still say they would support for president Putin's lapdog, who really set the stage for much of this. Remember, Putin wanted NATO filled with dissension and separation. That's what Trump did. He wanted an excuse and a cover for having meddled in our election. Trump gave it to him. He wanted to get back into the G7. Trump advocated for him. So they were really locked at the hip. And, you know, it was interesting, that clip you showed of Tom Cotton. George Stephanopoulos, God bless him, went around and around with Tom Cotton. Why can't you condemn this person? Why can't you separate yourself? And the answer to the question, the real answer to the question, was he's a coward. And his political ambition and his fear of his own base prevent him from being morally and intellectually consistent. And that's really true of the entire Republican Party. So I think, frankly, it's too late for most of them. I think we would need a complete revamp of the Republican Party for it to be a pro-American party. But I think this is a great opportunity for the country as a whole and the world as a whole to rediscover our moral center. It's a reminder of what courage, of what decency, of what democracy, of what free people can do. And it's a reminder that the enemies of democracy at home are the same ones who are siding with Putin. That's a point that many of us, Matt has made eloquently, I've tried to make, that, listen, you can always tell the people who are not on the side of democracy. They're the ones bolstering the dictators overseas. And that's exactly what the Republicans have done. So I hope this is a giant wake-up call, not only to the Europeans, like the Germans, who are finally arming themselves and helping Ukraine, not just the Swiss, who are actually going to break their neutrality and seize or at least freeze Russian assets, but to Americans at home, for them to look around and say, who is on the side of democracy? Who is on the side of the rule of law? And if you're with the thugs, if you're with the January 6 people, you were probably with the Russians on 2/24, the same people, because they believe in thugocracy, they live in intimidation, and they do not believe in anything other than the power of might and sheer force. And I think we've got to wake up with the rest of the free world and get our bearings back, get our moral bearings back.
Matt, I've only got about a minute left, but to just underscore what Jennifer has said there, you have Russian state media using clips of Pompeo, using clips of Tucker Carlson. I mean, to say that they are on Kremlin talking points, I think some people may wonder if that is hyperbolic. It is not. They are now being used as propaganda inside of Russia.
Well, yeah, that's evidence, prima facie evidence. I mean, Tucker Carlson is the spokesperson for the Republican Party. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. He's the spokesperson. So every time they do that with Tucker or somebody else, add Ron Johnson to the list of people that have facilitated Vladimir Putin in the midst of this. I'm actually in the midst of all of this and the awful tragedy and what's happening so badly in Ukraine, as hopeful as I've ever been in the fact that we could have a democratic renewal of the country. And I hope, and maybe somebody in the White House is listening, the big speech that President Biden is going to give on Tuesday, I hope is short and is sweet and is fundamentally about the state of democracy in the world and why what's happening in Ukraine is connected to Europe and is connected to America. And if there's a dark line that runs through all of those dots that leads. And if the president stands up and says, this is a perfect moment for the renewal of democracy, we've been Rip Van Winkle on history for 20 or 30 years. We've now woken up. And now's the time for people to pick a side, as Jennifer just said. Now is the time to pick a side. You're either pro-democracy or you're pro-autocracy. There's nothing in between.